Hello, today I want to talk about this idea of the manna in the desert that the Israelites received. So we'll start in Exodus chapter 16, where it says, "Then they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt." And so here we have the Israelites who have been set free from slavery in Egypt through God's mighty signs and wonders that He worked to bring them out of the land, and through the Red Sea on dry land, after then swallowing up the armies of the Egyptians who were in pursuit. And so they've been brought out to be brought to the promised land then, and the Lord really wanted them to enter in the promised land quickly, but as we know, that wasn't the case because of their unbelief. So we see this here beginning in verse number 2, where it says, "But the whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness." And of course, it's quick for us to be able to point a finger and say, how could they do this, right? But it is true of all of our nature that we see the Lord's working and moving and the nature of His character, and yet we grumble in our own hearts and would at times are in disbelief at what He can or will do for us. And so it's true of all of us that we have this temptation to grumble and disbelief as well. In verse 3 it continues, "The sons of Israel said to them, 'If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread until we were full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this entire assembly with hunger.'" And this speaks to a wonderful point, because this idea of being full speaks to satisfaction, of being filled and satisfied. And we'll speak and talk about that as we move forward with this idea of manna. Because as we know, the Lord is a Lord of abundance, and in Him is true satisfaction. And so the Lord used this as an opportunity to demonstrate that to His people and to test them on this matter as well. In verse 4, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, so that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction.'" And so again, He was testing their faith, because faith has to do with the idea of not being able to see everything ahead of time. We walk by faith and not by sight. And we don't believe in the things that we see, but the things that are unseen. This is the nature of faith itself. And so the Lord was testing their faith. And again, He tests our faith every day when we can't see something ahead of time, when we have to wait every day upon Him and gather from Him the manna, as it were, His wisdom, the knowledge of who He is, and trust in Him rather than grumbling and continuing in disbelief. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. And so He's given provision as well on the Sabbath to gather twice as much on that day. And then in verse 6, "So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, 'At evening you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt.'" And again, this idea that they knew that He had brought them out of the land of Egypt was the idea that it was for a specific purpose, and that they were His people, His chosen people, and not to be brought into the desert to die and to perish, which again, I'm guilty of at times, and I think we all are, that we see that the Lord has blessed us, that He has called us, that He has justified us, sanctified us in Christ, glorified us in the heavenly places with Christ, but then we think that He's yet planning some kind of doom or ill, something of ill content in our lives. But yet He's brought us out of sin and out of death to bless us with abundance and satisfaction. Now that always isn't going to be what we want. Like the Israelites wanted fancy food, in essence, a lot of things that they had in Egypt. The Lord sustained them with manna and with quail, but we don't always get what we want, but yet we will be satisfied with a greater substance when we seek after the Lord. So in verse 7 it continues, "And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your grumblings against the Lord. And what are we that you grumble against us?" And Moses said, "This will happen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening." So again, this is the birds or the quail that were brought into around the camp of the Israelites every evening that they could take from and eat and prepare meat for themselves. And bread to the full in the morning. And here we have that phrase, to the full, which means to your satisfaction, to be satisfied or filled with this manna. So the Lord will provide bread to satisfy you. "For the Lord hears your grumblings, which you grumble against him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against the Lord." So again, we have to be careful what we say, how we think, because ultimately, when I complain, when I am unsatisfied with the provision of the Lord, what am I really complaining against? Because I have everything I need in him, and I may not have the things in this world that I desire, but yet my greater desire should be a satisfaction of the Lord himself that he brings when I delight in him. Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, come forward before the Lord, for he has heard your grumblings." And it came about, as Aaron spoke to the entire congregation of the sons of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "I have heard the grumblings of the sons of Israel. Speak to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God." And that is a very powerful statement, of course. Really, the Lord wanted to reveal to the sons of Israel who he was, ultimately. And again, he gave them a test. He sort of hid from them where they would be receiving their food, their substance, their satisfaction physically on a daily basis, so that they would rely upon him, so that they would learn that he is reliable and faithful and provides in abundance for satisfaction, and that he brought them out of slavery in Egypt for a specific reason and would care for them on a daily basis. And so he was teaching them and trying to show them his faithfulness to build their faithfulness. And then later on in the chapter it says, "So it came about at evening that the quails came up and covered the camp." And this is evening time, and they could gather meat for themselves. And in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew evaporated, behold, on the surface of the wilderness there was a fine flake-like thing, fine as the frost on the ground. When the sons of Israel saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" And this is literally what manna means. I didn't learn this until today, but manna literally means, what is it? The Israelites saw this, they didn't know what it was. For they did not know what it was, and Moses said to them, "It is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat." And so that Moses points out to them, this is what the Lord's providing for you. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone gather as much as he will eat. You shall take an omer apiece according to the number of people each of you has in his tent. The sons of Israel did so, and some gathered much and some little. When they measured it by the omer, the one who had gathered much did not have too much, and the one who had gathered little did not have too little. Everyone gathered as much as he would eat. So everyone for that day gathered what they would need for that day. Some had more people in their tent as a group or a family, some less. Moses said to them, "No one is to leave any of it until morning." But they did not listen to Moses, and some left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. They gathered it morning by morning, everyone as much as he would eat. But when the sun became hot, it would melt. There's a lot of things we could talk about at this point. I'll kind of leave it simple, but to say that the Lord gives us daily everything we need, and we should seek first him. That's, I think, very critical, that as we begin each day, mornings are important. The beginning of each day is important for us to seek him, to seek his word, to seek him in prayer, to seek his presence in our lives, and to understand that he will provide for us exactly what we need for that day, and not too little or too much of anything, but the perfect amount of provision for us and satisfaction for our daily needs. And lastly is this verse from the same chapter, verse 35. It says, "And the sons of Israel ate the manna for 40 years until they came into the inhabited land," that is the promised land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. And this to point out again the faithfulness of the Lord, that he provided for them all the way through their journey until they had entered into the promised land. And again, we can have confidence that the Lord provides for us everything we need to the full, in abundance, complete satisfaction for us, for our physical needs, obviously, but spiritually, that again, when we seek after him, when we delight in the Lord, he'll fulfill the desires of our heart, and there will even be an overflow of that. Physically, he provided exactly the right amount for them, as he does for us, whether it's money or clothing or shelter or anything like that. But the wonderful blessing is that he provides an abundance and an overflow of satisfaction and delight and joy in our lives as we seek after him, as we trust him that he's brought us out of sin and out of death through Christ for a specific reason, and seeks to bless us. And he'll test our faith. He'll take away something from me that I may want or may desire physically. But yet, I always have him as the perfect provision for everything, for the desires and the hungers of my soul to be satisfied with. Take care.